The following story has been brought to you by StoriesToInspire.org.
I'm about to tell you something that's going to change your life. It should be Ilu Nishmas for my mother, Luna Bazdona, and my father, David Ben Frida. What I'm about to tell you will tremendously affect you and change you in many, many areas. People have asked me over the years, how did I start? How did I start spreading out about learning 2 laws of Lashon Hara? And I want to share with you how it started. About 5-6 years ago, my daughter came home from school. She came home with a booklet on laws of Lashon Hara and things about Lashon Hara. In there was a letter, and I actually brought it here, a letter, I wish I made it big, a letter from Rabbi Kanievsky, Reb Chaim Kanievsky's wife, Aleh Shalom. And she writes in the letter, there was a group of people came to my husband, Reb Chaim, and said, how come all the tzaras, so many people were getting killed, Rachmana litzlan, in Eretz Yisrael, and a lot of tragedies. And they asked Reb Chaim, and Reb Chaim said, the reason is the mouth. The reason is Lashon Hara, Rechilas, the bad things are coming out of the mouth. The only way to fix it is a person to stop being careful, being on Lashon Hara. And in the letter, she writes that she recently saw a letter from Yehuda Segel, the Manchester Rosh Hashiva, Rabbi Yehuda Segel. And in there, the letter said, anybody who learns 2 laws of Chafetz Chaim, he promised he's going to help defend in heaven, in Shemayim. And he said he never saw a family in his life that learned it, didn't have Yeshuas and children, Shidduchim, Parnasa, good kids, and Refuah. And in the letter, she writes 3 stories. Somebody didn't have children over 20 years. She told them to do it, and Baruch Hashem, they were zeicha to have a son. Somebody had 2 older daughters. They both got engaged a little while after, and somebody, Rachmana litzlan, had the machla. She told all the family members, and they all decided to learn it, 2 laws of Lashon Hara. And the mother, within 1 week, the hospital called, take your mother home. The machla is gone, disappeared. And she writes, and I'll quote it, we have seen open miracles performed by people who have taken upon themselves to learn 2 halachas a day. And after I saw this letter about 5 years ago, I said to myself, why don't I tell others? Why don't I start to tell people? And I even remember the people that I started telling. I had somebody in my shul where I daven. About 4 months later, I told him he did it with his daughter. 4 months later, his daughter got engaged. Somebody else, 5 months. I started getting a few stories here and there. I even had one story, I remember this almost about 4 or 5 years ago. Somebody told me, Menache, it didn't work. I said, what do you mean? He said, my brother and his wife didn't have children. I told them to do it. And I said, how long they're doing it? 5 months. I said, don't stop. As Hashem, you'll see something, hopefully. And about 4 months later, the brother's wife was expecting. And I had somebody, this is going back also about 4 years ago, somebody had Rachmana litzlan 2 miscarriages. And he told me, it was Abai Chassan, he said to me, my uncle told me to be careful with Lashon Hara, and he said he started learning with his wife. He tells me 11 children later, I never had a problem again. And actually, this past week, I heard a similar story, not as amazing, but there's also a story with somebody who I know. The lady told me the story. She also had a problem with miscarriages, and she said she started learning it, and Baruch Hashem, everything's okay. And then, little by little, I got 10, 15 stories, and one day my wife asked me a powerful question. She says, why doesn't it work for us? You tell so many people, Baruch Hashem, I gave people even sometimes haftachas, promises. I said, how come it doesn't work for us? I had 3 kids in Shidduchim for a few years. And I told my wife, the reason is because you have to learn it also. She said, I saw she was sticky to learn it. So I told her, I'll make you a deal. If it doesn't work within 1 year, I will buy you expensive jewelry, like $4,000 jewelry, which I'm not a Rabbi. I'll borrow it. She said, okay, a deal. 6 weeks later, my second son got engaged. 3 weeks later, my first son got engaged, and 6 weeks after that, my daughter got engaged. 3 people got engaged before any wedding. People were saying, what'd you do? How did it happen? People came over to me in the wedding, and they didn't even know the third one. I said, just learn 2 laws. I convinced my friend, him and his wife, he had a daughter in law school. She was trying to get a good shidduch. And about 5 months later, his daughter got engaged. A lot of people got engaged. I even had somebody, Rav in his shul, who told me he got 3 Yeshuas in 1 year. And just going to, even recently, I had somebody, my neighbor, my next door neighbor, told me amazing. He told me that he had a friend of his, Hasidish, a friend, he needed 4 major Yeshuas. 4 major Yeshuas. And he went over to him, he said, listen, what should I do? I'm broken. He said, I have a neighbor called Rabbi Menache. He tells people to learn Chafetz Chaim, 2 laws. And he started doing it, him and his wife together. I'm going to tell you which book to use it soon. And they started to learn it, and 45 days later, which he came over to me, Motzei Tisha B'Av, he came over to me and he said to me, all 4 major Yeshuas were fixed up. And now people have asked me a lot this big question, which book to use? What and how does it work? Is it a segula? What is it? Well, how come it's miracle stories? And I explained to him, it has nothing to do with the segula. He said, what really happens is when you start learning it, you, your wife or family, what happens is there's a change. And once there's a change, Hashem opens the gates and He gives you what you need. Anything. Shidduchim, children, I have stories from every realm of life. And that's real. And what's the books I explain to people to do? I'm going to show it to you right now. It's called, one book called The Daily Companion. Chafetz Chaim, A Daily Companion. It's made by Art Scroll. Most of my stories come from this. There's another book also, if anybody's interested. It's called the Joseph Drazen edition, a red book. And there's Guard Your Tongue, Family Lesson a Day. But most of my stories come from this blue book. Many, many miraculous. I even had one about 3-4 weeks ago. Somebody came over to me. I speak in different shuls. And I was speaking in one of the shuls in Lakewood. And he came over to me. He says, Rabbi Menache, he says, I did not have children 5 years. And me and my wife decided, let's learn this blue book. 3 weeks. He told me within 3 weeks we found out my wife was expecting, which is amazing. People say, what happened? Does he make a little move? Actually, somebody else told me a beautiful other idea. He told me, he says, I had told him about learning it. 2 months later, his daughter, 24, got engaged. Him and his wife were learning it. And he told me, you know why it's so fast? I'll tell you why. He says, because it's brought down from the great Zohar HaKadosh. He brings down that when a person says Lashon Hara, chas v'shalom, he causes his davening to stay in the air. Stays in the air. And all of a sudden you have many tefillahs, many prayers. A person prayed for many years, but it's still in the air. And when somebody starts learning it, he starts feeling bad for his sins. And all of a sudden, once he feels bad, he's doing tshuva, all those tefillahs that are in the middle of the air just go straight to Hashem. And once it goes straight to Hashem, all of a sudden he gets a Yeshua. And that's what he told me this for. And others, Rabbi Kanievsky, Allah Shalom, she also added, when your mouth is pure and you don't say Lashon Hara, then any tefillah you daven opens up the gates. And I'm going to show you some amazing stories I had in where I teach. I teach also I'm a first grade Rabbi, and I also teach in one of the schools, Lakewood Cheder. Somebody there in Lakewood Cheder told me, he says he had somebody, his grandfather had corona, he was in big danger. And he told me 5 uncles and aunts started learning for him. And he was able to get out of the hospital during the big danger 2 days later, and he eventually had a total shlema. There's a person big in Chinuch. He wrote a book on Chinuch. His name is Rabbi Brizak. I actually met him. I met him about a couple of years ago, and he actually told me 2 great stories. He said one story he told me with Rabbi Kanievsky, Allah Shalom, that she told him a story where somebody was in danger, sakana, and she told him about learning it, and the woman had a total shlema. And the second one was amazing. He said he knew a family that somebody's son was off the derech, was not in the derech. And he said, learn the laws. And the parents started to learn the laws. I think the father started learning it himself with him and his wife. And Baruch Hashem, a little while later, Brizak met them. How's your son? No problems. Baruch Hashem, he's on the derech, everything perfect. There's a doctor in Lakewood, and he gave me permission to say this. I want to share with everybody. His name is Dr. Tarlow. He's a skin doctor in Lakewood. And he told me an amazing thing. My wife had stitches about two years ago. She was cleaning the Shabbos candles, Motzei Shabbos. The glass went into her finger. And we went, Motzei Shabbos, we went to the Dr. Tarlow for stitches. And while I was there, my wife said, tell him some stories to distract from the stitches. So I told him some stories. He tells me, okay, I'm going to do this blue book, this daily companion. I'm going to do it. My wife's already learning it. I'm going to do it. 6 weeks later, he sees me, he jumps up. He says, I don't believe it. My daughter, almost 24, she got engaged. He was very excited. A year later, he tells me a powerful line, which I want to share with everybody. And this is really the tachlis of everything what I'm saying. He said, I'm more happier that my life changed than my daughter getting engaged, getting married. I'm more happier just from that. And I said, 2 minutes. He tells me he does it 2 minutes a day in the morning. And really, I timed it myself. It takes up to 3 minutes a day. Your life will change. He tells me I'm more happy. And I'm going to explain right now why. There's a lot of reasons. When you start learning this, especially this daily companion, any book that gives you inspiration, he says your mindset changes. You start thinking in a more positive light. And you think good about others. Not only that, your children watch. There's somebody lives a few blocks away from me, told me a beautiful, beautiful thing. He said to me, when you get a husband and wife learn it, what happens? The husband's friends, neighbors, relatives. The wife's friends, neighbors, relatives. The children are watching this. You change not 2 people. You're changing a whole world. The family becomes better. They're more positive. They're a nicer family. And the whole family becomes greater. And now it's a beautiful sight. Somebody called me from Borough Park, I think it was a lady. She was screaming on the phone. She tells me, I don't believe it. Me, my husband, my kids, we're so excited about learning it. It's so beautiful, a positive life. And I'm going to give you an example. I thought of this example, I think it was today or yesterday. Imagine somebody cuts you off. You're driving a car. And in the middle of the day, you cut and you drive, and a guy cuts you right off, for no reason, just cuts you off in the car. You almost get into an accident and you continue driving. There are two ways you can react. One way is, what? How did the guy cut me off? What chutzpah? Another way of reacting is, maybe he didn't mean it. Maybe he wasn't concentrating. Now, when somebody learns the laws of Lashon Hara, I'll tell you what happens. He thinks more positive in life. So when something like that happens, it's not going to destroy him. It's not going to mess up his day. He's a different person. I had somebody who told me he did this blue book 15 days. He told me this about a week ago. He said, I've been doing this book 15 days. And somebody told me big news. He says, I had a Yecheskel desire to spread it to the entire world. And I controlled myself. I didn't say one word. And even my friend called me up. You heard about the news? I was able to change the topic. And I said to him, I said, what, 15 days? Yeah. He says he was able to change his entire life in 15 days. Person can change his whole life, and Hashem opens up the gates. When somebody changes, and people ask me, why is this not called a school? And I explain to you. Because the reason why this is totally different is because what really happens is you become different. So now Hashem gives you whatever you need. Yeah, you need money, you need some Yeshua in some other areas. Hashem says, oh, now you're a different person. So now you have a different thing on you. Now this story I just mentioned with Dr. Tarlow, there was somebody in the shul. I want to share with you a few stories in that shul where he davens. There was somebody there who told me he thinks it's from this shul. He said he had an $18,000 tax bill from the state taxes. And he told me, he said he didn't give me permission to say his name, but it's an amazing story. He showed it to me. I have the papers. If anybody wants, I have it on my file. That was all over $18,000. He owed to the state taxes. He said, you know what? This is 2 years ago. I'm going to learn Chavetz Chaim. He started learning the 2 laws of Lashon Hara. This was, I think, May, 2 months. A month and a half later, he calls the state taxes, the tax, and finds out what he could do. And a nice lady answered. And he said, could you help me? He said they were able to lower it to 2 payments, 1,300 something and 1,050. And he couldn't believe it. It was a shock. But he didn't stop by that. I couldn't believe it. I think I wouldn't have done this. But he said, he's going to call again. I'm still learning Chavetz Chaim. He decided, I'm going to call again. He called he got the same lady. And he spoke to the lady and he says, listen, is there any way you can make it lower? And the lady said, I'll try. Let me see what you did over the years. And he checked the other years and he couldn't believe it. He says, a miracle. The lady was able to knock it to 0. He tells me it's even bigger than all your shidduchim stories. He tells me, because this never happens. Knocked off 18,000. In that same shul, there was somebody else who told me that his nephew was in the car. He was going in the car and he had a chavrusa with his grandfather to learn Chavetz Chaim, 2 laws. He went to the back of the car to sit and to learn on the phone with his grandfather. He said there was a big car crash a little over a year ago. The car smashed into the way he was sitting before. Hatzalah had to revive the bacher who was sitting there 2 times. And he said his whole zechus of living is what? From mamish learning 2 laws of Chavetz Chaim. You mamish change your life. I had recently, about 3 weeks ago, somebody told me an amazing story. He says he was trying to buy a house. Now nowadays the market up and down, we don't know where you want to buy. And he told me, you know what? He told his wife, let's learn Chavetz Chaim. Let's learn Chavetz Chaim. So they started, it was about August time. Now this is already next August, a year ago. He started learning. He started learning with his wife, and he tells me he started looking to buying a house. He said he was about to buy a house, and somebody told him, don't buy it. The neighbors are no good, you're going to have tzaras. He didn't buy it. And then he was about to buy a second house, and the same thing happened. He couldn't believe it. He told me he thinks it's because he was learning Chavetz Chaim, Hashem saved him. And then he went to Jackson. And something happened before he went to buy it. The owner decided to lower the price all the way down. He ended up buying the house. He tells me 2 weeks after that, he saw the house when there was a house nearby they was selling a house. $100,000 more than he paid for his own house. And he said to me, he feels Hashem saved him from the other houses and he gave him a zechus. I have somebody, as I said, I'm a first grade Rabbi. And there's somebody in my school, my boss, he has a brother. And his brother had 2 daughters. 2 daughters didn't have children. And I remember this as going back about a year and a half ago or so. And I told him straight out, I said, he's a friend of mine also. He said, if you learn this blue book, Daily Companion, you and your wife, I promised him. I gave him a haftacha. I said, one of your daughters will be expecting within a year. That's what I told him. And he said, okay, like a deal. Middle of the year, I actually saw him in a chasana. I saw him there. He was broken. He says, nothing happened. Actually, one of the boys in the school said, Menache, you promised. I said, it's only half a year. I always say within a year. And about a year later, he tells me, Pesach time. He says, my daughter's expecting. I asked him, what about your other daughter? He was quiet. Didn't say a word. And I said to myself, okay, I'm going to ask the boy in the school. I asked the boy in the school, just, can you tell me, is your other sister also like expecting having? And he goes, yeah, yes. I said, I couldn't believe it. There's a little joke to it. There's a little sense of joke over here. My boss told me, he's, oh, Rabbi Menache, I see you made one miracle with my brother. And I said to him, one? Oh, two? You know something I don't know? He went over to his brother to ask him. And he said, yeah. The other one is also expecting. And this person came over to me on Yom Kippur. And he said to me, he wasn't excited as only his grandchildren that he had. He tells me, my life is a different life. I'm aware what comes out of my mouth. He was excited to tell me that it's a different life. And that's my goal. Anybody learning it, a person starts learning it, your life will change. I had somebody in my class, this is amazing. The mother decided to learn about a year ago for her sister. She has a sister, 44 years old, not married. She started about a year ago, about a month and a half ago, her sister got engaged, 44 years old. About 3 weeks ago, I got a phone call. This is an amazing, amazing story. I tried to spread the story everywhere. A girl called me up. She's in 11th grade, she tells me. She says, I heard you speak a little over a year ago. I think it was last May. A little over a year. Now we're in August 2023. Last May, I spoke in a girls' school, high school. I was more of them. She said, I was so inspired. And she said, I have a sister and a brother divorced. And I said, I'm going to learn with somebody else, which I tell a lot of people, try to learn with somebody else. She learned it with somebody else. She tells me after 4 months, which was the Yortzeit of the Chofetz Chaim, in the end of Elul, her brother got engaged. She tells me her sister, meanwhile, started learning with another girl, 26. Within 6 months, the sister got engaged and she got engaged. And she tells me that means 3 in 1 year. And besides her life changing, person starts learning, your life becomes different, a total different life. I had somebody from different country called me up about 2.5 years ago. She tells me like this. She says, I've been learning it for 30 years. She learns a book called Guard Your Tongue. My husband learns the Hebrew one. I learn Guard Your Tongue. She tells me I have 14 children. Married with no problem. Shidduch. Imagine a person has 3, 5, 6. How many tzaras people have today? So many people have tzaras with shidduch. I'm telling you. She tells me 14 children, married, not even one problem. And somebody where I teach in the Cheder told me, she says, that's my grandmother. 2 son-in-laws had corona, Rahman al-Islam, and Mamish, Baruch Hashem, healed. And there's a zechus. When somebody learns it, your life changes. It's tremendous. I had an interesting story of somebody in my block. This is an amazing story. The mother told me she had just finished the book and she restarted it. Her son was with a bike. A car knocked him over. This is in 11th and Madison. This is in Lakewood. If you know Lakewood, it's 11th and Madison area. And the car knocked him down. She told me the boy was under the car 1 full block on 11th and Madison. The Hatzolah came in. He had just a couple of scratches. The boy actually told me he was from hip to foot under the car for 1 full block. Nothing happened. Just cuts on his hand. That's it. And the mother told me, I remember what she said. She said, I finished the book and I started again. I didn't just stop. You have anybody who starts learning it, learn till 120. Anybody who hears this recording, I'm telling you right now, I can give you almost a haftacha, 99%. If parents learn, especially when the kids are young, if you keep learning it over many years, you will have nachas from all your children. Remember those words. I've tried it. Many people. I met somebody 35, 40 years. He said he's doing it. Him and his wife. For many years. He actually told me this about 3 weeks ago. And he met a very big tzaddik in the last generation. Somebody, Rabbi Yitzchak Cohen. He was a big tzaddik, Mekubal. And not Mekubal, he had Ruach HaKodesh. And he actually was thinking to stop. This man told me, he's a mashkiach. He said, I was thinking in the middle to stop. And I went to talk to him. In the middle of talking to him, he goes to me, don't stop learning Chofetz Chaim till 120. He said, I was shocked. How did he know? He told me, he said, I don't even know how he knew. But he understood how important anybody learning it, your life changes. Your kids watch you and you become a different person. I had somebody, this is very interesting. He gave me permission to say his name. His name is Aaron Gabiov. And it's a very powerful story. And he gave me permission to say that he's one of the heads in Shagas Aryeh. He's assistant principal, and he also runs Dirshu. He said like this, 20 years ago, he said he started getting blisters on his feet. And it was very bad. It was mamish very bad. It was hurting him. He said he was thinking he's going to go on crutches or maybe even go in a wheelchair. He actually said the story in a long way. I'm making it shorter now. And then it went to his tongue. At least by the feet, he had some painkillers, but the tongue, there was nothing. There was nothing to do. It started hurting him tremendously. He tried to daven to Hashem. It was hurting, painful. He went through this 5 long years. 5 long years of tsaris he was going through. And he didn't know what to do. And somebody told him, why don't you learn the laws of Lashon Hara? Learn the laws of Lashon Hara. So he started to learn it. He told his wife also she should learn it. And I think it was this book, The Daily Companion. He told me it's an English book. I don't remember if it was The Daily Companion or another one. His wife was learning it, and he was learning it not together. He tells me 3 months later, the blister's gone. There was no blisters in his tongue. He couldn't believe it. And a year later, he goes to a doctor. His name is Dr. Preschel in Lakewood. And he says, "Doctor, can you give me some painkillers?" And the doctor says, "Painkillers? There's nothing there. Go dance." He told me, he said, "I'm doing it now for 15 years. 15 years I'm doing it." He said, "I've had no problems at all, no blisters. I'm perfectly healthy, Baruch Hashem." 15 years he's doing it, and his wife. And it's amazing. The person said, "What's going on here?" I'll tell you why. Once you make a little move, once you make a little action, Kadosh Baruch Hu goes out and does something for you. I'll tell you a cute story now. This is a very cute story. I like to share it with a lot of people. He didn't give me permission to say name, but it's a good story. It was somebody who, my son went to the same class as his son, and they had a few kids in Shidduchim, older kids. And my son said, "Go to talk to them." So Purim, I remember, I think it was almost 2 years ago, I went to the house. They lived near me. I spoke to them. I was machazik the wife, the children. About 5 months later, their I think it was about 25-year-old daughter got engaged. Okay. Another 4 or 5 months later, their 29-year-old son got engaged too. And not only that, who was the girl? The girl went to my cousin. She sells jewelry in Lakewood. The girl went to my cousin. My cousin says, "Do Chavetz Chaim." My cousin tells people about learning Chavetz Chaim. The girl and her mother started learning Chavetz Chaim for 6 weeks. She got engaged to this boy. This boy from the other family, whose family was learning Chavetz Chaim. I call this a Chavetz Chaim Shidduch. And it reminds me of another a different type of story, but similar I call the Chavetz Chaim story. This was Erev Tisha B'Av. We're now in almost Elul with Mamish, and still in the month of Av. Erev Tisha B'Av, I got a call. A man called me up. He says, "I am 33 years old." 33. And somebody told me, "Let's learn Chavetz Chaim." Who's this man? The man knows me. He knows me from my story, so he was inspiring this man. "Let's learn this blue book, Chavetz Chaim Daily Companion." We started learning this book, The Daily Companion. The day Shidduch started, my wife is from even actually his college from a different country. Within about 90 days, I got engaged. I do it with my wife, my college is about 25. And not only that, I sent her my recordings of what I learned, the Chavetz Chaim, and she got inspired. And I hope, as Hashem, they're not married yet, Baruch Hashem, they're engaged still. And Baruch Hashem, Yeshua's people start learning it, your life changes. I want to tell you, share with you a medrash. The Vilna Gaon brings this amazing medrash, and this is a powerful one. He says like this, the medrash says, anyone in the world that stops himself from saying Lashon once, even once, he's about to say something wrong, and he stops himself from saying it, there's no angel or creation could imagine the reward he's going to get in the next world. It's impossible on this earth to imagine what reward is once. So imagine a person starts learning it once, twice, 3 times. His life, he's going to have so much reward. One time, your whole life changes. And now you understand why a lot of times people have Yeshua is very fast, because a person changes. I got a call last summer. It's amazing. I got a call. The man says, "I have a story for you." He was going crazy. I said, "I got to hear the story." He said like this. He says, I think it was about 4 years ago. I think it was 4 or 5 years ago. His daughter was very sick. She went into a coma. Rahman al-San. She was in Philadelphia. The doctor actually told him, "I don't think your daughter's going to make it." That's what he told him. And he told me, he says he was in Lakewood driving, and there was an Nisayan of Lashon Hara. He controlled himself. And he turns to Hashem. "Hashem, I controlled my mouth. Please, Hashem, open the mouth of my daughter." 10 minutes later, he gets a call from his wife. His wife says, "I don't believe it. She's crying. She woke up out of the coma. She's awake." It was a menace. I said this story a few months later in Lakewood in front of a lot of women. And a girl in the end, this was the end of the talk, and the girl jumps up. She says, "That's me." I was like, "What?" She says, "Yeah, that story that you just said was me. It was me. I'm 14 years old. It was 4 years. She was 10. It happened to me." And I'm like, "What?" Couldn't believe it. I heard the story 2 months before. And here I hear a miracle story. My daughter was in Eretz Yisrael last year, and she knew a lot of my stories. Baruch Hashem, I'm in the 300s. I have over 350 stories of Yeshua's from every area of life. My daughter was Eretz Yisrael, and she was in seminary in Eretz Yisrael. She said she joined 5 girls to this book, The Daily Companion, this blue book. She says 5 girls to learn for 6 people. One was a brother and sister of one, 2 sisters of 2 others, and 2 madrichas. She told me in 4 months, all 6 people got engaged, and the last one was on the last day. And we have so many stories. I daven sometimes in one of the shuls in Lakewood. I daven a lot. And I was there one time, and a man, a young person, he told me he was recently married a short time as a Hasidic. He got married young. And he tells me, I want to tell you a story. He tells me, yeah. He says, my wife was expecting twins. First kids, twins. And my wife was expecting twins. And what happened was, I got some news that there was a problem. My wife had some kind of problem with the liver, and they wanted to make the early delivery. And I didn't like this. So I told my wife, let's learn the laws of Lashon Hara. We started to learn it, and then afterward they checked my wife. Everything was okay. She delivered, Baruch Hashem, twins, and it came back again. And I told my wife, we got to relearn it. They started learning again. Baruch Hashem, the problem went away. Actually, in the same shul, somebody else told me also a different type of story. He told me, he said he didn't have children. He had a bunch of kids, and then his wife stopped having kids. And then for 5 years, everything they did, they even did treatments, everything, nothing worked. Then somebody also told them about learning Chafetz Chaim. He told me that I started learning with my wife, me and my wife, and Baruch Hashem, I think it was a few months later, his wife was expecting, and Baruch Hashem, tremendous. I'm going to share with you something really amazing. And my wife had another friend, I had gone out with my wife anniversary, and this was in June. And my wife said, what are you going to do with my other friend? She over 10 years didn't have children. I said, I'm not sure. I wasn't sure. It was a big thing. I came into a shul right after that. Who did I see? I saw the husband there. Recognized him. I went over to him. Got his wife on the phone. I spoke to them. And I was machazik them. And they started learning. And Baruch Hashem, 2 months. She told me, I spoke to the wife herself. She says, from June, end of August, she found out she was expecting. And Baruch Hashem, she had a baby girl about a month and a half ago. And Baruch Hashem, I'm getting tremendous amount of stories of Yeshuas of every type of area. But really, the main thing is when a person changes. He makes a little change and Hashem opens the gates. I had somebody who I know, his grandmother was at a chasana in Lakewood. I don't know if it was a Lakewood, I'm not sure where it was, a chasana. And what happened was, in the table, they were starting talking Lashon Hara on the kala. Oh, something with makeup. And she told the good people there, oh, it's Lashon Hara. We have to stop. They stopped, Baruch Hashem. And she told her grandson, who told me, if I wasn't learning it every day, I wouldn't have said a word. And now you're aware of it. Once you learn it, your life changes. And I even tell people, I'm a Rabbi, and I teach. And I had somebody in 8th grade. If anybody knows in the Cheder, I'm involved with many hundreds of kids in the 8th grade. I even told them, if you do Chafetz Chaim, and I did tell them something else called Yecheskel Rabbi with Kavana, you'll get into Mesifta. I had 1 year, about over 200 kids got in. One kid didn't get in. Went over to him. Tell me the truth. You're learning Chafetz Chaim? He tells me no. I even tried to convince him. I said, because if you do it, you'll get in. And I knew that there's a chus, a person starts learning. Amazing. I had somebody who told me, he said he came home late at night, him and his wife, and he said they were about to, they said, maybe we won't learn it tonight. And they said, no, we're going to learn, let's learn it. And his wife says, I hear some water dripping, check it out. She fell asleep, he went to check it out, somebody was in the bathroom. He pushed the door open, his daughter was a little older, she fell asleep in the bathtub, the water was by the chin, he screamed, she jumped up. And he told me the story happened about 2 years ago, in the time of Rosh Hashanah, he gave me a whole thing about Chafetz Chaim. The name of the sefer Chafetz Chaim wrote was Wants Life. Wants Life that's what it is. I saved my daughter's life by learning Chafetz Chaim to halachas. And a person starts learning it, you become a different person, and that's what changes. I'm going to share with you a ma'aseh with the Chafetz Chaim, which I heard from Rabbi Waxman from Muncie. He said an amazing story. He said one time the Chafetz Chaim was deep in thought, and somebody saw him. And he went over to the Chafetz Chaim, he says, what's the Chafetz Chaim thinking about? Chafetz Chaim says something like this. I spent hundreds and hundreds of hours on Chafetz Chaim, on writing. And I started writing it. I had to check for mistakes. I had to sell. It was many, many words, maybe even 1,000 hours. And I gave up a lot of learning. I could have learned more depth. I could have finished shots more times. And then he stops and he said, it was all worth it if one person once in his life stopped saying Lashon Hara once in his life, it's all worth it. And so many people came over to me and told me their lives changed. They stopped saying it. It was one person, I spoke in a ladies group, a lot of ladies, and the lady told me, I forgot my coat. It was Motzei Shabbos, I forgot my coat. I came back Wednesday. She said, I stopped saying Lashon Hara 10 times since you spoke. I started learning this book, The Daily Companion, 10 times. 10 times. She stopped. So many people have changed. A little effort, a little push. A person changes, his life changes, and so many things happen also. And I have even stories of, I had gone for a simcha in California, in LA, this past year. I went for a simcha, and while I was there, somebody told me I have a story with money. There was somebody that he knew who was having major money problems. And he told him, let's learn a page a day of Chafetz Chaim. So he pushed them in, let's learn, it's going to help you parnasa. They started learning, this was a little bit before Corona started. And he started learning it, and they finished the book right before the Corona started. The man was matzliach, was successful during Corona making money. Means Hashem opened the gates even during the time where people were losing money. This man who was a poor person, he had hatzlacha, he had success in making money. And it goes on, a person starts learning, he has in different areas from all areas. I had somebody who spoke to me just now, this past week. Somebody, a boy in my class. The mother told me her son had a problem with the teeth. Major problem with the teeth. Had to have all kinds of root canals. $7,000 bill. $7,000 bill. So what'd she do? $7,000 bill. She didn't know what to do. Her husband learns, didn't have the money for it. So she decided to learn with another lady. She told me, Shmiras Lashon, on Lashon Hara. Learns with a little bit. One time, after she finished learning, about 2 hours later, she calls the dentist. Is there anything we could do to lower the $7,000? The lady says, I don't know, but there is an insurance. You gave the telephone, you call it up, see what happens. She called the insurance. The insurance says, we are willing to pay the entire $7,000 from the insurance, but you have to pay a monthly payment for the insurance. How much is it? $19.99, $20 a month, and you can cancel when you want. $20. I just heard the story this past week. $20 a month, and she told me this amazing story. A person has Yeshua even one time. But the more you learn it, you become a different person. You change. One day, this about 2 months ago, I came into my school teaching. I went to teach. I'm a first grade Rabbi. I came in. I parked the car, and somebody bangs on my car. And I see somebody there, one of the Rabbis from the other school where they ran from us. He tells me, you told my wife about learning Chafetz Chaim, and she started learning it, and my daughter just got engaged 40 days later. I have about 20, 30 stories of 40 days. I couldn't believe it. I said, 40 days after I told this person to learn Chafetz Chaim, the daughter got engaged, and it was the first shidduch that she had. First shidduch, I think it was 21 or 22. I continued walking into school, and I met the second grade Rebbe, and everybody saying Mazel Tov to him. I said, what happened? I said, this Rebbe had a daughter, 24. And in the end result, he started doing with his wife 3 months together every day. A different book in English. The daughter got engaged. The boy was 23, the first shidduch he ever went out with. And she's 24. I said, how is that possible? Hashem could do whatever he wants. You open the gates.
Enjoyed this story? Come again. Bring a friend. StoriesToInspire.org